I'm Marc Sidwell, and today we're taking a closer look at how to put Britain back on the path to prosperity. And joining me is Dr Lawrence Newport, co-founder of the Looking for Growth campaign. Lawrence, many of our listeners will be familiar with LFG by now, but take us back to the beginning. What sparked the idea for this campaign for you?
So, thank you for having me. Originally, I was just setting up the Crush Crime campaign. I was still actually deep in research, putting together the policies to launch the Crush Crime campaign with, when there was more and more news about the upcoming budget, and I noticed a very strong pattern. This was in October. There was a very strong pattern to each of these announcements, which were increasingly negative. There was a very clear sign that though it wasn't going to be as negative as they were briefing, this is obviously the strategy, would be to brief out really extremely negative ideas and then kind of actually release something still quite bad, but not as bad as they were briefing. This became very irritating to me, and I thought, I cannot handle another government following in the footsteps of the last government, following on the footsteps of the last government, and so on, that we are just looking at yet more decline, more stagnation, and the same old tropes over and over and over again. This led me to talk to Joe Reeve, the founder of Future House, someone who used to work in Silicon Valley, and my brother, who used to work in the Treasury, and just said, we need to start something. We need to do something. There is not a coordinated movement calling for pro-growth policies in a very loud, very pressured way that can actually make governments feel under pressure to do something. Taking what I learned from campaigning, taking what I learned from the Bully XL campaign and otherwise, I thought we should try something here. But it shouldn't just be a campaign, because this is something which is going to be continuous, it's going to be ongoing, and so it needs to become a political movement, something that people can join, that they can advocate for, and that will be able to advocate for a whole ream of different policies, much like the environmentalist movements, much like the woke movement. We didn't have an environmentalist government, we didn't have a woke government, but we had many environmentalist governments and many woke governments.
Yeah, well, you certainly seem to have sparked a nerve, and I can see already you've been growing, setting up new chapters around the country, that sort of thing. It
Yes.
seems to be remarkable, the energy that it's got already. Has the reaction exceeded your expectations? Is it more than you thought it would be?
Yeah, so when we actually launched, we said we were going to host an event 11th December in London, and we kind of thought we might get 50 to 100 people. In the first day, we had 500 people sign up. By 2 weeks later, it was 1,000 people. This was, we had to find a larger and larger venue. And on stage, on the day we launched, I made it very clear that, here we have a bill that we're going to advocate for, our infrastructure bill, and also we would like to set up chapters across the country. This was a statement of we would like to. I didn't think that it would take off straight away. I thought probably a 6-month lead-in time, something like this. That was completely wrong. On that very day, I had multiple people asked to set up chapters across the country. And just this week, we've had 3 chapters start up, and we've had 3 people contact us about setting other chapters up. We're going to hit 20 chapters soon in just 4 months.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Certainly living up to your own rhetoric about the possibility of making things happen quickly. Well, let's turn to some actual policy issues that all of this relates to. Now, it's been a week since Spain and Portugal were hit by massive power failures.
Yeah.
The blackouts were hundreds of miles away, of course, but they offer perhaps a glimpse of what could be next for Britain, with the highest energy prices in the world, aging infrastructure, a planning system that chokes progress. The UK seems dangerously close to its own energy reckoning. Now, Lawrence, we don't know the exact causes of what happened in Spain, but to improve our own resilience in the UK, to prevent something on that scale happening here, what do our priorities need to be for energy?
We need to immediately follow exactly the kind of premises that we put forward in our at LFG. We produced our own infrastructure bill, and one of the things we did with this was to dramatically reduce the amount of hurdles, or shall we say rewrite the entire system really, to enable extremely fast building of nuclear power stations, overhead cables. That needs to be applied really across the board to all energy projects. It needs to be something where we should start asking questions, not as the government currently have done, which is you take the current planning system and how do you best reduce timeframes, etc. We should instead start from physical reality. How long does it take you to build something? And then justify every delay to that process. There will be reasons to delay things. There are reasons that you would want to check safety and otherwise, but we should have to justify each of those and not come from the premise of, well, how do we best tweak this already monstrous, insane system? This is really non-negotiable. If we don't change this, and we don't change it dramatically, and don't start, for instance, building nuclear power for the longer term, of course, solar, actually put money into battery research as well, actually tidal, but also we are going to have to look at gas. We are in a ridiculous position where we are importing gas and not using our own reserves. We also have now extremely high taxation on energy and on companies that, for the moment, if we had an actual strategy, if government had put in an actual strategy 20 years ago to achieve the kinds of things they want to achieve on net zero, etc., we would have a country with a very stable grid, stabilized by nuclear power. That is not what they built. So we are now in a genuine emergency. We will face blackouts. We almost did in January. I think we were 20 seconds away from a blackout. If enough people had put the kettle on at that point, we would have actually had blackouts across the country. Spain is a warning. This is what we will look to in the future. This is what will happen to us. Unsustainable.
It's, as we talk, there's just been quite an interesting intervention in the energy debate from Tony Blair, who through his Tony Blair Institute put out a report saying basically net zero is all very well, but you're unrealistic about how you're approaching these things, and it needs to be rethought completely to bring people with you. And in that, he was talking about, you were mentioning nuclear there. He was talking about mass nuclear rollout. He was talking about all sorts of really ambitious technological approaches, carbon capture and storage as well. But that immediately then caused all sorts of trouble with the current Labour government, and they sort of got them to step back slightly from some of the stronger statements they'd made. But do you think that's a sense of the sort of change in the political weather that Labour may end up having to sort of reorient its energy policy in these sort of more ambitious, technologically directed ways?
Well, they either do that or they're going to face mass blackouts. And the reality is that we have in this country, because no one has been willing to put together plans and follow them in any consistency, and they haven't wanted to look at reality, reality eventually catches up with you. And we are now in a situation where we are moments away from blackouts. We are seeing them in Europe. We have the warnings in front of us. And what is extremely concerning is that actually what Blair was stating has been treated by the government with such shock, rather than looking at blunt reality, which is, yes, there would have been better ways of doing this, and yes, they should have done those, but we are now where we are, and they now need to act extremely radically, or we do face a very unreliable grid and continued high prices.
Well, let's turn to the more general question then of how we can actually get things built fast, which is what you're talking about in energy, but it's also a much more broad challenge for Britain these days. Britain isn't lacking in ambition, but too often it's being throttled by bureaucracy. From activist litigation to obstructionist quangos, the machinery of progress is grinding to a halt. Now, Looking for Growth recently launched No More Delays, which is a new public dashboard tracking the real cost of stalled infrastructure. And Lawrence, some of the projects highlighted there include HS2, which is 10 years overdue, the Heathrow expansion, that's 15 years late, the new hospitals programme, that's 10 years overdue. Now, in its quest for growth, the Labour government has been giving good rhetoric about these concerns and about pushing for new infrastructure building. They've approved Luton. They've said they're minded to approve Heathrow expansion. They've said that Gatwick expansion is basically on the cards. They're trying to tweak a few things there, but it looks like it's going through. But this is all on paper. These are all commitments. The real question is, can they break through the blockers and make things actually get built fast? Do you think that's going to happen?
Um, I think it's really commendable that they are actually trying. Um, the status quo here has been to not try and to simply allow this thing to grind to a halt. The problem is that it has been left for so long. Simply trying is nowhere near enough. They need to actually be very radical, and that does mean ripping up the playbook and looking at physical reality. I've had conversations with people around government and advising government who are stunned to just hear how fast you could, for instance, build a wind turbine. This is something excellently done by Britain Remade, where they just showed you could build up a wind turbine in, I think, about a day. And yet it'll take us years for a wind turbine to go somewhere. This is completely and utterly not how you can industrialize a country. It is not how you sustain any kind of modern economy. Or rather, if you don't allow these things to happen, you accrue this debt that we are now paying. So the way of getting out of this is they need to be brave. They need to have very clear plans, and those plans need to be take your assumption as we should be building a wind turbine in 2 days, wind farms in a few weeks. We should justify every single addition on top of that. And that does also mean very difficult conversations around things like judicial review. And by difficult conversations, I mean dramatic restrictions on judicial review. It means actually leaving some international treaties on, for instance, making sure that we have this very bizarre situation where if you launch a judicial review on environmentalist causes, you are essentially capped at the amount that of fees that you have to pay, even if you lose. This violates hundreds of years of British law, violates hundreds of years of precedent that make it very clear to stop people having frivolous lawsuits, that if they have a frivolous lawsuit, they bear the cost. We've exempted a whole category of frivolous lawsuits from this, and so we get many of them. This is obviously completely wrong and should be stopped immediately.
Yes, you're talking there about the Aarhus Convention, I think,
Yes.
which people like Chris Todd at the Transport Action Network have notoriously just been throwing in these judicial reviews that they know they're going to lose, but it delays things hugely and costs the government hundreds of millions. But the challenge is whether Keir Starmer, particularly with his legal background, his commitment to the rule of law and international treaties and so forth, is really going to have the stomach to pull us out of that convention. But more broadly, I suppose I wanted to think about, you're talking about really ambitious thinking. Labour has done a bit. They've got this planning bill coming through. They're putting in planning reform. Indeed, in their planning bill, they reflect some of the suggestions that you made in your own bill. There are things like payments for people who are near pylons that are going up, money off their bills at least. So that reflects the sort of patriot payment idea you had. But I wondered, to really get things going, other than, say, pulling out of the Aarhus Convention, which is one challenge, but in domestic policy, in a sort of bill going forward, what's the big thing you think they're missing that would really help change it? What's a proposal that you want to see brought forward that Labour isn't yet taking forward?
Well, I think it's a really good point on, they've taken several of the ideas from the LFG bill, but they are all watered down. I think this is the exact problem. So we have a bill which gives them a direct path that, if they passed, would enable them to build nuclear power stations, SMRs in particular, potentially, within an incredibly short time period. They will be able to actually put up overhead cables and build AI data centers within this parliament. They can actually see the benefits. It'll be possible to move power around this country in a much better way if you can just put up more power lines. We've given them the actual route. What's happened is they have taken some of these ideas, they have watered them down. Even the judicial review, we had much higher threshold to bring judicial reviews. They have done a much more watered down version of this, which means it's still going to cost us hundreds of millions of pounds. It is not wanting, for maybe aesthetic reasons, maybe for principled reasons, maybe for others, to really take, as I say, the baseline of what is physical reality and what do we have to justify on top. They have taken some of them, like the environmentalists, putting into a central fund rather than having continuous these insanely lengthy, several 100,000 pages documents that cost us millions and millions and millions. That is all very welcome, but it is not enough to get this built fast. Something that they've said is that they are hoping that this might reduce planning times by about 50%. So currently it takes us 30 years to build a nuclear power station. Under their reforms, it might take only 15. That is obviously nowhere near good enough. We cannot wait 15 years and 15 years of blackouts. That is just not possible.
We're recording this early because of the bank holiday, so we're actually speaking on the day of the local elections. We don't have the results yet, but I think it's fairly clear that those results are going to be seismic in the sort of political makeup of Britain. It's going to be a very good day for reform. It's going to be a very bad day for the two main parties, particularly the Conservatives. The Lib Dems are going to do very well, perhaps the Greens as well. We really are seeing a sort of shake-up of the parties and a move towards some of the smaller parties becoming significant political players at first at the local level and then perhaps more at the parliamentary level as well. I mean, and there are people who are interested in growth across all the parties. It is to some extent a cross-party phenomenon, but each of the parties also has their blockers and their people who are interested in things other than growth as well. Do you find your ideas getting traction everywhere? I know, of course, Reform, you've had quite a good relationship with Zia Yusuf. Do you see them as optimistic for this? Do you worry about the Conservatives? What's your relationship with all the various parties and their attitude to growth?
I think, quite encouragingly, there are a lot of people within, I would say, Labour, Conservatives and Reform who really do understand the dire situation that we are in and really do actually want some quite radical reforms. The difficulty is, of course, who is able to actually bring those forwards. I think for many in Labour, it is very frustrating that the government is not moving in a direction that, even on a practical level, makes it more likely that that government will succeed in another election. If you do not improve people's lives, they will not reward you, and they shouldn't reward you. Similarly, the Conservatives, I think it is, they have not yet actually made policy pronouncements. They don't seem to. One thing that has come back to us repeatedly at LFG events is that the audience continuously, the LFG audience, I should say, by the way, is very, very, very much up for grabs from any major party. The audience is very, very, very open to ideas. They just want things to get done. That is consistently what we hear from the audience. But they will also tell me, and have said repeatedly, even if I like the ideas of the Conservatives, they have not said sorry enough. They feel let down. They feel completely betrayed, and they should do. You know, this is a problem that now both major parties do inherit. Reform has a lot of opportunity. It's whether or not they're able to capitalize on that opportunity and break the mold from, unfortunately, what we've seen from the two major parties, which is an inability to really take the radical ideas, which will only over time, the more time we wait, the more radical those ideas will have to be to actually solve these problems. Yes,
well, Westminster suddenly continues to struggle with the idea of moving fast, but LFG is definitely breaking the mold there and showing that these things can be done. We'll be keeping the pressure up. Lawrence, it's always a pleasure to talk with you. We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much. You can join Lawrence's campaign by going to lookingforgrowth.uk and make sure you're subscribed to our daily email briefings. Go to capex.co, that's capx.co. I'm Marc Sidwell. Goodbye.